Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Coach Harris Show. Thank you so much. This is episode 14. Today's awesome conversation was with my buddy, Matt Bressler. Matt and I went to college together for a brief while. We haven't seen each other actually in about 6 years, so it was really nice to get on a Zoom call, see his face, chat a bit, get into some deep topics that I think you will enjoy very much. Today, we will talk about things such as finding your purpose in fitness, right? Finding stronger whys behind your goals, how to come up with your goals in fitness so you can see consistency, habits being formed, and motivation for the long run. We also take a deep dive into Matt's athletic background where he has gone through some really severe injuries, ACL injuries, labrum tears throughout his shoulder, and other things of that sort. And that was a very challenging time for Matt because he was used to being a high-performing athlete for many, many years. And those injuries kind of put a halt on everything and had him have to reassess where he was at with his fitness, his health, and come about with some new, strong whys behind what he does physically. So if you resonate with any of this, we talk about that and much more in the episode. We start off kind of just chatting, getting to know Matt's background, which I think you'll enjoy a lot, and then we really dive deep into those subjects. So stick around for the end. I think you'll enjoy it. Just a reminder, if you want your questions answered on the podcast, if you potentially want to be a guest as Matt is today, you can jump on my email list in the description below. That is how Matt got connected with this podcast because I reached out, asked if anybody would want to come tell their story, and that's how we are here today. So the email list is a great place to ask questions, get answers, and get some closer communication with me. Thank you so much once again for listening into the podcast. Without further ado, today is the episode with Matt Bressler. Enjoy. What's going on, Matt?
You know, it's been a year since this pandemic started, and we're still here, man. We are still living the dream. So, I can't complain too much. You know, life is good. I got my health.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like the perspective. Yeah, just before we started recording, it was funny. We were talking about how every sentence for a long time would always come back to COVID. You know, it's like all things considered, everything's good, but we're kind of past that point. It's about the 1 year mark. So I think we can have some regular conversation without always going into COVID. I'm sure we'll get there though, because it has been a crazy year.
Oh, absolutely. The question is, what I'm wondering is once we get, far enough and past this, is that, are we going to be referring to things as before COVID, after COVID? Like, is this going to become the, this huge milestone where all of these aspects of our lives change?
It's like BCAC.
Exactly. In the history books.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. I think it always will. Like, it might be the further we get away from it, the more that becomes what we actually base things off of, because it was 2020, like the start of a clean decade. And it'll be like, was that before? There's going to be a new name, I think, like before the shit fan or after, something like that. I don't know what people will call it, but
whatever.
All right, man. So I want to get into kind of just your backstory as we talked about. For whoever's listening that doesn't know you yet, you want to just deep dive into, again, your life, any part of it, personal stuff, fitness stuff, and kind of just take the floor.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll start, jump around a little bit, but
jump around all over.
Born and raised and still living in Boston, Massachusetts, great, great East Coast guy. Sure you've talked, you may have mentioned it in the intro, but Harris and I met in, I guess the year would be 2014 in we were at Indiana University. I moved into the dorm across the hall. Growing up I was a multi-sport athlete. In terms of fitness, I was I definitely didn't necessarily give the attention to like the thinking about what I'm putting in my body, how I'm taking care of my body. It was all, but I definitely wanted the performance out of it. So, but I ran track, played soccer, played rugby, and then eventually rugby became my main thing. Did that in Indiana for a little while. I'm not sure. I did about 3 semesters at Indiana, and had to, I realized that, maybe it wasn't the right place for me. It wasn't necessarily, I wasn't in the position I needed to be to succeed, first time away from home.
Yeah.
18 years old, there's so much pressure on a high school student to expect to know what they want to do with their life, how to, to go straight from, you've been in school for 17 years and now you're deciding, or sorry, 17, you've been in school for 13 years. That's math. Now you've decided, you're right back into this higher level, you're high, this next level of education. And I need to take a moment to take a step back, figure out where my priorities were, what I was actually interested in, what I actually cared about. I think it's easy to get wrapped up when there's so much, you don't have a lot of time, especially, nowadays, we don't have a lot of time in our lives to kind of take a step back, relax, take a lay of the land, take a deep breath, look at what's working, look at maybe what's not working, do a little bit of constructive some honest personal evaluation, look at really be honest, some constructive, maybe, some constructive criticism for your own decision making and how that's going, and how that aligns to where your goals are. And so I just, I need to take a moment to take a step back, remove myself from an environment that maybe wasn't the best. I was living in a fraternity house at the time, which on the campus of Indiana University is a difficult place when you are still kind of figuring out your own way. You're in a group with a lot of people that that are different, but kind of have, there's a bit of a group think going on. So if you're struggling, especially if that is not in line with your own personal, how you see yourself with your own personal, it's your own personal, your view of yourself, your own priorities, things, who you want to be. Maybe if that's not in line, it's easy to get lost in that. So, came back, started working full time when that would have been 2014. So 20 years old, something like that. 19, 20, started working full time, few different odd jobs, some bartending, bunch of service industry stuff, and then ended up at working for a big shoe company for whatever it's worth, working at Clark's. I don't know if people know the shoes. They're kind of cool. Sometimes they're not. Their grandparents probably love them. But yeah, it was a growing up time. It was kind of it was an interesting experience to go from, you're going from college, this crazy environment, you're away from home, meeting all these new people, all of a sudden, back to the familiar, most people are off at school still. And so you end up with a lot of time by yourself, and you got to figure out, okay, what do I do with this? How do I, it's not the same social situation anymore. So what do I do with all this time?
Yeah. It's a lot of self-awareness, right? Like at that young age, man, to be able to like step away from something and realize you need more time to reevaluate and to kind of maybe refresh some things. I don't think I did that when I was at that age. It took me a while to really start to make those kind of decisions. So that's pretty good.
I appreciate it. I think it was really just the beginning. It was sort of I didn't quite understand. It was more just knowing, all right, whatever I'm doing is not working.
That's enough.
I was like, that's as far as I got at that point. And I was like, all right, this is not working. So, and I was just too far in it. Sometimes you're just in so deep that you can't see the forest for the trees, or so to speak. You got to take the step back. But that was a pretty interesting time. As you can imagine, 20 years old, you're seeing a lot, or 19 years old, seeing a lot of people off, partying, doing this, doing that. And you're kind of doing your own thing. Kind of it can take a toll on somebody, especially when, they may have, going to college in the first place was obviously a goal. And I had my own vision of how everything was going to how everything was going to go. You have a path that you think is going to happen. You have the ideal path, and then, they say man plans and God laughs, and you have to sometimes, if the plan doesn't work, you can't just stop. You have to figure out a new plan. You have to figure out, how do I get back on track? Or, you have to reevaluate that plan and see if it's still viable, if it's still what you want to do, and if it's not, you got to scrap it and start over.
Mm-hmm. It's like really the only options, And I like what you're saying, because I mean, all of this applies to everything, like you emailed me some really good stuff that we could potentially chat about, like mental health, physical health, kind of getting back into training without a clear why and figuring that out. And it's really doing what you did, which is just like scrapping things, trying things again, and just being willing to do that, I think, is important. I want to talk about your kind of athletic days, where it was a little bit more a part of your life, the serious athletic stuff. And as you wrote to me, how you went about finding your new why after competitive sports wasn't a big focus. Because, I think as we always talk about, like, not having a really clear reason or a strong reason to move your body, to train, to take care of yourself, really in the general sense, just to like give a shit about your own health is kind of hard. Because when you lose sight of that reasons, we tend to lose sight of everything else, and just don't build the habit. So I'm curious how you went about finding something strong again, or if you're still figuring that out, how you're going about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, first of all, I think what you brought up is incredibly important in terms of, mentioning, that in the end of the day, when you get past, for most of us, the period of which that we're an athlete is, maybe is our youth. Maybe it extends past high school into maybe some college athletics. Maybe some people, even fewer people, go on to do some sort of intramural adult athletics. But it's not something you think about your entire, if you're an athlete, physical activity isn't something that you especially think about planning into your day, because it's built into, whether it's when you're a kid and you have gym class, or you're playing sports, so you're just always active and you have practice. And so it's not, everything is already organized for you, and it's not something that you're doing for yourself necessarily. Like, you want to do it, but you're not taking the time out of your day to think about, all right, what am I going to do? Why am I going to do it? So I think that was the first most jarring thing. So I came back, I played some rugby while I was at Indiana. Was dealing with, I ended up tearing my labrum in my shoulder. So that put me on the couch for a little bit. Had to start modifying from there. Got that better, and I started playing, intramural club men's rugby right away. So I kept, I was 19, 20 years old, playing with 30, adult men, but did that for a while. Again, still had that targeted thing. So at that point, all of my training was a lot of powerlifting, a lot of Olympic lifting. It was, I'm going to be strong, powerful, explosive for this particular thing. Without, not thinking about my everyday life, not thinking about necessarily what was going to be best for my health or whatever. It was about putting on lean muscle mass and putting on it for this performance. That all kind of came to a grinding halt when I tore my ACL in, to be 2016 at that point. I was 21 years old. Really bad, full tear. I was out on the practice field, felt it go immediately. Couldn't walk, could barely, had to hop on one foot, had someone help me hop across the field to my car to drive, so I could drive myself home.
So I assume it was the left ACL?
It was the right, dominant leg.
You still drove there?
Yeah. Luckily, Achilles tendon still works.
Exactly, so but I guess depending on how much the pain is, like, you can still move the ankle a bit.
Yeah, I would say the full tear, it's actually, they say a full tear is often less painful because it's not, it's severed and then it swells a lot more. So you get super immobilized super quickly. It hurts, but it hurts, it's most painful at the beginning, and then as it swells, at least the joint itself becomes immobilized. And so it doesn't, at least in the immediate, the drive home, I think is still, I think I still had some shock. I knew what was going on. I knew pretty much right away. The first step I tried to take, my knee just gave out on me. So,
wow.
Did that, but that was really kind of the beginning of a big change for me in terms of how I looked at my about health and fitness and exercising, because obviously I went on to have surgery, was laid up on the couch doing the whole rehab thing. And that whole time I was rehabbing, I made a pretty, it didn't take long to decide that my rugby career was done. In that, it's like, I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting paid enough for this because I wasn't getting paid, obviously. And you're putting yourself through, the strain that you put on your body, your joints, you're putting yourself in a situation where, you could get hurt. And, you know, I've always been someone who needs to have something active in his life to kind of keep me balanced. So that was a hard time. That rehab time was difficult twofold because one, it was obviously on the couch all the time, not doing a lot, and the whole rehab process itself is difficult. And you can't do a lot of the things you want to do, stairs, go out in public, go walk around. But then also it was the mental part of it was, okay, what am I going to do? Like, what's next after, if I'm not going to play rugby anymore, what's next after I finish recovering? What am I going to use to fuel my motivation to do my physical therapy and to get back stronger? So first, what am I going to do to fuel that? And then once I'm back, what am I going to do? Why do I keep, I have to, like, you need to have some sort of purpose. You can't, for everything you have to, we do things, even if it's something small, like we do it because I like it. Everything that in our lives that has any meaning to it should have a purpose of sorts.
Exactly.
So it became, it was definitely it started dealing with some, there was some, it was a bit of a mental health struggle that, kind of first some of the early, so I guess sort of the early mental health issues I started to deal with was sort of this identity crisis where I've always been this athlete, always been this performance athlete. So yeah, what's the next evolution of me going to be? Because I think we grow as people, we grow, in our emotional intelligence, we grow, we're still developing mentally, at least, through our at least mid-20s. So while there's all this room for us to grow as individuals and as people, and I think that's part of the evolution is how do you go, and obviously this probably applies more to people first moving from college into younger adulthood, but it applies to everybody. As you get later on in your life, you're always looking for purpose behind what you're doing, especially as your time becomes more and more constrained, and the value of your time only goes up as you get older. People rely on you. You have so many things to do, and so you want to make sure that what you're doing has a purpose. So I started to kind of get back to the basics and go, all right, what are the things that make me happy? In its very essence, like, what do I like to do? And I'm a big outdoorsman. I've always loved hiking, just being out in nature. And I started to, once I got better from my ACL surgery, I decided, you know what, I love hiking. I'm going to just do this a ton. Like, this is going to be my therapy, and it's going to be my therapy both physically and it's going to be my therapy mentally, because I'm already spending all this time by myself. So I might as well get out of my head. Might as well get out and at least get into a different environment that's not the same environment that I do my schoolwork, and not the same environment I do my professional work, not the same environment that I've been in for, the 6 months, 8 months it is laying up on the couch recovering. So I think it was good. That was a good place to start for me, because I got to do something I liked. I got to start moving my body again, and I started to gave myself time with my thoughts in a different environment, which makes kind of, sometimes I think I'm a personal believer that sometimes your environment can very much influence how you're looking at things and how you're thinking about them. And sometimes you just need to change your physical environment in order to change your perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I think we'll sometimes confuse, or we'll try to separate like the mental and the physical side too much, but they really are so connected in so many ways. And just like you said, sometimes somebody will struggle with their mental environment, so to speak, right? They're thinking bad thoughts. They're thinking like all these self-defeating things. They're not moving forward. They don't have any momentum going on upstairs in their head, but they might not realize the importance of literally just changing the physical environment. Like you said, just going outside or starting to, I talked about this earlier on a podcast I recorded, where one of my favorite things about fitness and training is simply the fact that it's a tool to control other things, right? Mentally. Like if I'm feeling kind of all over the place, if I'm feeling like I don't have momentum building with whatever I want to be focusing on, I'll simply go pick up a kettlebell and just do a hard set of something. And it starts to get the wheels turning, the blood flowing. I start to think a little bit more clearly, like with a positive tone to what I'm thinking, because I did something positive for my body. So it's kind of taking that physical environment, whether it's doing something physical and changing from that point of view, or literally going to a different place physically is really important. Can you talk more, just like, can we dig deeper on the idea of momentum? Because you said you were in kind of a bad mental health place, you were rehabbing, it was a tough time. And then just that little act of like hiking more and being outside and doing those things started to build a little bit of momentum, and it took from there. So how would you recommend somebody really create momentum when they're like stuck? They're not motivated, they don't have a purpose.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. It's an incredible, especially when it comes to health and fitness. And, we know that, the key to anyone to health, especially over, fitness and over a prolonged period of time, is consistency. And obviously to get to that point where you're being consistent, you have to start from somewhere, and you have to ramp up. And like you said, you have to build momentum. For me, I think I said this before, it came down to starting from the basics, where it was, because I'm starting from a place where I am not even walking. So it was, from the very basic thing, I wasn't thinking about lifting weights. I was thinking about, how do I move my body, period. Starting with that. How do I, so sometimes it's setting, especially when you're starting, when you really feel like you're stuck and you're just nowhere, it's the incremental goals. It's the little baby step incremental goals. And, you want to have, you want goals that are, talk about, there's a whole lot of work that, a lot of stuff that's been done in talking about like good goal making, good goal setting. But just starting really small when you're nowhere is, to start running, you have to take it all starts with one step, and then it's the next, and they get faster and faster, and your stride gets longer, but you have to start. So you had to, it started with the very basic of, how do I get my body moving? And then the next question was, what do I enjoy? And how can I try to make these, congruent, which is, easier said than done sometimes when it comes to working out, because not everybody enjoys exercising as much as others. Some people have a lot of things they like doing. Some people, it's more about finding the thing that they dislike the least, that maybe, you learn to enjoy. But yeah, I think there's something, goal setting is just so important, especially when you're starting small, and you got to take it only, I think you have to look pretty short term. I think, especially when you're starting from a feeling of being stuck or somewhere really low, I think start making it's great to dream big. I really think, it's great that when people have big aspirations, that can be really intimidating. When you're going from, I can't even walk, to, I want to go run a half marathon next year, it's great, but there's so many intermediate steps, and it's so easy to you have one bad day and you look at this goal that you're working towards that feels so far away. And it's, so you can lose your momentum like that. So I think it's building up incremental goals, and then finding small ways to challenge yourself within those incremental goals. So, for me, it was scaling up the distance. I started by trying to find, I sort of had a baseline level of how difficult my body could physically do. So then it was, all right, I'm going to do, a 3 mile hike. And then it was scaling up duration. And then I was like, okay, I want to, now I'm feeling stronger on this leg. I'm going to maybe carry a little bit more weight in my bag, or I'm going to do something maybe a little bit steeper, maybe not as long, and tried to build up that way. And, and I think it becomes kind of, becomes contagious sometimes when you're starting, you're working on one thing, and you find that in the rest, someone's, because momentum feels good, progress feels good,
Yeah.
and so sometimes it just, I think it permeates, sometimes can permeate the other things in your life, and it's like, all right, I feel like I'm making improvements here, and I want to keep doing that, but how do I improve this other aspect of my life? But yeah, I really think for me, the key for momentum, it's starting small, and then, it's building from there and continuing to think about, again, why am I doing this? What do I want to do? So, if it was, in that case, for hiking, it was, I just, I started reading about, I read the book, A Walk in the Woods, which is about, which is a firsthand account it's by this guy, Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien. Yes.
Yeah, I know that name.
He's a well-known travel writer, and it's about his experience through hiking the Appalachian Trail. Now where I am in Massachusetts, I would go up to New Hampshire. So I'm right on the Appalachian Trail. So I would start to fantasize, again, not about, okay, maybe one day I'm going to do this whole 2,100 mile trail from Georgia to Maine. And I would just think about that. And even though it's maybe not necessarily was a goal, but it got me kind of thinking about something bigger than myself. And this, I started reading about the history of the Appalachian Trail, which then got me down reading about, environmental preservation. So, it stemmed off into this whole other interest of mine. But, it just got me, it was this full mind and body commitment to something that seemed so much bigger than myself.
You said a lot of good stuff there, man. I think like every 60 seconds I was going to say, okay, let's stick on that point. But then you said a new point that I want to go to because they were all so good.
I definitely have a talk. I have a tendency to go off on tangents, and
dude, that's perfect. That was so good. So let's see, from all of that, one thing I'll kind of mention that I always like to think about too, from what you started with, is the idea of making big goals, but also not really focusing on that, right? Focusing on the small little things. So I don't know how much you do reverse engineering in terms of goal setting. Is that something that you'll commonly do? Like you'll think of a big goal and then you'll actually take the time to step by step break it down into smaller and smaller pieces? Or is it just you have a general big goal and then you go right to the little steps? Like, do you do a whole process for reverse engineering, or what does that look like for you?
I'd say reverse engineering, less so from a health and fitness standpoint, but it is just it's a very important way of looking at things systemically. I background is in economics, and it's very much about starting at the result and working back to all the causal factors. So that's I 100% agree with the importance of that in any sort of goal setting. I personally probably could do more of it in my everyday life outside of a work setting, but
in health and fitness, it's more just like you said, you had some bigger goals, but you really just kind of went right to the little things you could do each day, and that created momentum into the next.
I would, for me personally, but I'm I recognize that I'm someone that needs to move. So it's sort of this burning. There's something burning. There's like something inside me that's always pushing me to go do something. So, I know I'll get there, whatever that big goal is. But no, I 100%. I definitely, the reverse engineering in a goal setting standpoint is a great way to, especially if you don't know what those little goals are. I mean, I think that's the biggest, is that if you have the big goal, but you don't know what the other steps are, you have to figure those out somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that stuck out to me from what you said is the idea of starting small and I'm trying to frame it in the right way. Well, actually, what I want to talk a little bit about is doing something bigger than yourself. Because you mentioned that a couple of times with like the trail and the bigger vision of the goal, right? Where you looked into the history of it. There was all these other factors that started to kind of seem new to you. It wasn't just like this is my fitness goal. It's doing this big thing that goes back into earlier years with other people, and there's all this history. So I really think that could be a huge, potentially life-changing thing for somebody, is to start to think of things away from just themselves, whether it's their family or other people they care about, or if it's just finding some kind of cool goal that has a bigger history. So can you talk a little more about, like, let's say somebody right now, they might know the little steps they can do day to day, right? They want to be on that path of starting momentum, like you said, but they still don't feel that purpose. They're like, but what's the point? When I get to that bigger thing, then what? Like, just as with you in college and sports, it's like you could rehab, you get excited, but then what's going to happen after? And you kind of had to find that. So I want to talk to the people that are like, but how do I really find that bigger than myself thing that I'm excited about?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any more thoughts
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important about whatever that goal is. If we're talking about health and fitness, or if we're talking about anything else,
Yeah.
the first question is, what does achieving, if you're setting that goal, clearly you want that, right? What does that mean to you? Like you said, you don't, if you can't, it's digging kind of into that next level. It's, if you want it, you want it because you want it, then do you really want it? Or do you think you either, is it because, you feel like you have to, or is it, because it's a goal that makes sense, or is it something that you really want? And if it is something you really, I think that's a way to sort of evaluate your own goal setting to begin with, on whether or not you're really working towards something you care about. I think that that's an important thing. But yeah, I think it's important to dig a little bit deeper and understand what is real, what our motivations are, and what do what do you want to get from this, whether it's mentally, whether it's, like you said, trying to think of the best way to
Yeah.
frame this. It's
I think I know what you mean. Like, just what are the real reasons? Or actually, another way that might be good to frame it is like, who do you want to become from it? I think about
Mhm.
that a lot. It's not just like, what do you want to get, but it's what kind of actual person do you want to live as, because something that, and I know this because I used to struggle with this too. Whenever my goals would be very just like, I want to get this or achieve this metric, or even if it was something worthwhile and I would feel better achieving the thing, if I didn't actually become the type of person who, practiced that thing often, it wasn't going to mean anything. And I say this a lot with, like, when I'm working with people that want to lose weight, it's like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to lose weight. It's a great thing. Sometimes it's wanting to get super lean or to look amazing is awesome, right? I don't think there's any problem in having like more aesthetic based goals or vanity based goals. That's great. But in order for you to really, at least in my opinion, feel amazing from getting that new body, you have to daily do the things that kind of person would do, right? And become that person. Because if you just on a scale lost 40 pounds, or you just got really jacked, or you just got really athletic, but you didn't actually do the work over weeks and weeks and weeks to get there, I'm I'm pretty confident you're not, like, a person won't feel that much better, you know? Like, you'll look better, it'll feel cool in the moment, but you have to kind of become that type of person to live that new way, to feel amazing from it. So I think onto what you said, it's like, what do you want? Who do you want to actually become? What kind of feeling do you want about yourself every day? Do you want to feel like a strong, badass athlete who looks awesome, who moves well, who enjoys their body, goes on hikes, does all these things? Or do you want to, like, live the way you're living now? You have to kind of make that decision. And if the former is more exciting, right, having a new way of life, then that could potentially be a source of purpose,
Definitely. That's a really important thing about, especially if you are working towards maybe more specific metric based goals, is the idea of wanting, of wanting to be a better version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and it's, makes it sets up this idea that maybe, even if that we're not, that there's not, that even if we have a goal, that there's not an end point to any, that we're not doing something. It's not, none of this, it should never be a means to an end, you know? And I think what you said about, not feeling, maybe not feeling like, you're that better person is, and I think that's part of it, because if you're doing something just to get it done, you're not taking the time to understand how it's benefiting you. And I think also you brought up a good point about, maybe doing it for your family, and, say it's someone, there's nothing wrong with having aesthetic based goals, number based goals, metric based goals, whether it's lose weight, put on muscle, lift this, all these are, they're, they're all very respectable goals, but they shouldn't be the entire story. It should be, if it's, say you're someone, if you're trying to lose weight, it's, again, it's why. Is it, I want to be able to, go on this trip with this person that I care about who maybe likes doing these outside things, or I want to be able to run around with my grandchildren, or I want, and, it's, again, it's making it bigger than just yourself, where it's, we all want there's nothing wrong with wanting to look good, but just looking good, or, just doesn't, like you said, you're maybe not becoming that better version of yourself, because you're not giving yourself the chance to like live as that person, because you're so worried about this means to an end. You're worried about getting somewhere, and once you're there, you're done. When it's not, it's about, and I think you mentioned on one of your previous podcasts about having, about goal setting, and maybe having more, maybe movement based goals, or, goals that are, maybe don't have these strict ends to them, where it's, I want to lift this, because then once you get there, what's next? Then are you just picking another number, and it's this forever chasing of metrics? Or is it, I want to feel better. I want to feel better when I walk around this place, or, so I think there's a lot there with, finding meaning in the things we do. And, even if they are things that we're doing for ourselves, most people have other, if you have, most people are doing things, not, you do things for yourself, you help yourself so you can help the people.
Yeah.
You want to be the best version of you for yourself as well as for everyone else.
Yeah, man. 100%. So two things from that we can maybe touch on is, one is the idea of, again, like just going deeper on the idea of needing to work for the actual thing, and become that person through, like, it's a cliche term, but like through the journey, through the process, right? Like the whole, and that, I don't really love those terms, because it's just life. Like the journey is just, I mean, that's your everyday, like you're living day after day after day. That's all there is to anything. So how does one want to do that? Do you want to do it the same exact way you're doing now, which if it is, fine, or do you want to do it a little better, right? Move a little bit more often, move a little bit more intentional with a little more intention. Like that's everybody's choice. But I was thinking about, I was squatting this morning. I'm doing a challenge right now where I'm squatting daily. And
Okay.
yeah, and I was thinking about like the squat every day, kind of the heavy barbell version of that. And I was just thinking about it now as you were talking, is like, I'm looking as we speak at a rack with some weights on it. Like today I did X amount of weight and it was fine. If I'm trying to picture myself, if this were to happen, right? If I were tomorrow morning to not know anything was going to happen different, go into the bar, do the same weight. Let's say in a hypothetical world, that weight felt extremely easy. Like a weird thing happened to my body where that felt like a feather when it's normally heavy. And I said, okay, let's add 100 more pounds, 200 more pounds. And somehow I doubled my max on the same day. Like this is completely made up, but if I did that and all of a sudden I hit a 500-pound squat when before it was half or something, how would I feel? I'm trying to like play this game with myself. And it would probably be cool. I would surprise myself. It'd be like, holy shit, I can squat 500 pounds. That's fun. But I don't think I would be so unbelievably excited about it because it was just this random out of nowhere thing, even though I did the result. Versus on a more traditional sense, let's say it takes me 6 months of squatting daily, focusing on my nutrition, grinding it out, like having failures where maybe I miss PRs or I don't do things that I wanted to do, and kind of just working my ass off to get to that point. 6 months isn't even realistic. 3 years, like whatever it is, when I get to the same result 3 years down the line, I would probably feel like 100 times better because there was all of that sweat, all of that work, all of those challenges, all of those overcomings that came to get there. It's the same exact result, but I think it would be a whole different feeling. Plus, I would actually be living with that feeling at that point on, because I'm the person who just spent the past 3 years getting stronger and stronger and stronger and achieving one metric. And now I'm on to the next, but I've been a strong person for 3 years versus it just kind of falling into my lap. So that's kind of like a weird, crazy example, but I think of that a lot with like whether it's weight loss or rehab or anything else. It's like the result is cool and you might want that in the moment, but if you didn't actually put in the work and go through all the challenges to get to that point, it's going to fade. So it's like sometimes that's a purpose for me. If I'm feeling a lack of purpose, I'm like, okay, it doesn't really matter what the outcome-based goal is I make up right now. I just need to pick something challenging, maybe crazy, bring it back to those little small goals like you mentioned, and then just do the work, because the work is where the fun part is. It's like that's what you're going to actually be proud of. And at the end of the day, like what else is there, right? It's like when you die, right? Do you want, and we're getting kind of meta here, but do you want your life to be one where you were always working on something more aggressive and ambitious, which I think is pretty respectable, or was it just one of kind of staying the same for 90 years, right? So I think like that itself, I think is a pretty worthy purpose, is just to always be pushing for stronger, more, better in whatever way that means.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's it's kind of that incremental progress,
Yeah.
where we're picking our big goal because it sounds cool and it's something we want. But like you said, it's about the incremental progress. It's about being better than the person being better than the person you were before. And it's not, progress is rarely linear. I think I want to, make that if for anyone listening that, you're going to have days where you take steps back, whether, as someone that's had multiple serious injuries or, everyone's had those times where they've built up a bunch of momentum and maybe they went away and they went on vacation for the weekend and they're going to do their, and you feel like you're starting back from square, but it's all about just looking forward. It's always about, that next incremental thing. And I do think and I'm kind of glad that you got a little meta with that.
Yeah.
Because, throughout, we've mentioned COVID and that we said we probably end up coming back to it. But throughout this past, the past year, there's been, I think I've kind of taken almost that more meta approach to health and fitness, but in life in general. And I do think there's something really important to that idea of incremental self-improvement. I guess I want to give, if we can rewind it, this past year has been crazy. It's been different. People have had to evolve every aspect of their life, from how they're working, whether they're remote, whether they've lost, unfortunately, but how they're working out, whether if they're living somewhere where gyms are closed. But I want to look, just as hard as the last year has been, I think for me, it seems like I want to, go back, say, about, almost 10 months, thinking back to the beginning of the pandemic. I was sitting down with a friend of mine. He had just gotten back. He was coming back in town. This is May. He was back in town visiting from being, he was in officer school for the Marines. So he was coming back before going off being stationed. And we were talking about state of the world and what life was going to be like. And, talked about, I was approaching it, I think, the same way everyone else was, where, oh, it's going to be boring. Oh, there's nothing to do. Kind of just, I don't want to say complaining, but dwelling on the negative of everything. And this is a friend of mine, shout out to Noah Rifkin. He's Lieutenant Noah Rifkin in the Marines. But he's like, look, man, we're going to remember this time probably for the rest of our lives. And when you look back on it, if you had all of this time to yourself, how are you going to remember this time? Like, are you going to remember this time for, as much as with all the struggle and as difficult it was, I remember it as a time where you just you just were. And it's this blur of time where, you sat on your couch, you watched TV, you know, you just did nothing. Or are you going to remember it? Or are you going to, say, you know what? I took this terrible situation and I tried to make the most out of what I could make the most of. And for a lot of people, that's time. I think a lot of people now and have in the past year and probably still have more time to themselves. I would say I'll apologize. Definitely, there's people with, if you have children and you're schooling them and they're home all the time, hats off to those people, because
Absolutely.
There's an incredible amount of, people are doing an incredible amount, to keep their households going. But if you're someone that just has had all this time, there are a lot of ways. There are things that you could do to at least try to better yourself in some way. And one thing, and I think and I think there's a lot of, whether it's physically, exercise, some mentally, and kind of I'm getting to the sort of the meta approach that I took to everything, is that, when you're sort of isolated, when you're isolated from each other and isolated from society. And I we moved up to, family has a little cabin in rural New Hampshire, like up in the White Mountains. And then this was from May to July. I lived there by myself, completely off the grid. And there's a lot of things going on in the country and in general during that time. But it's been very easy to get overwhelmed with what everything's going on. And I started to do a little bit of reading into philosophy, and I was drawn to some of the aspects of Stoicism. I was reading some of the writings of Marcus Aurelius. And I should say, I do not recommend Stoicism as an actual way to practice your life, because it's very, very self-centered, and it does not include other people that much in your life. But I think there's some good lessons to learn. And one of the big ones that you talked, that to this idea of incremental self-improvement, is that you only have, in the end of the day, you only have power over a select few things. There are things that you can control. And everything else is going to happen the way it is. So if you can find a way to center yourself on those things that you can control, like you're gonna find ways to better yourself, because you're not going to be so run down with all of this outside stuff and concerning yourself with things that there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, man. 100%. Like, that's why, I mean, I know we mentioned the word meta a few times, but like, I feel like that really should be the only stuff that really matters to talk about. Like, obviously there's specifics and there's details to any kind of advice or to lessons or whatever it is in fitness or anything else. But at the end of the day, like I tend to be the trainer, or even the person, if we're not talking about our careers, whatever, that doesn't like to give like very specific advice. Like, this is what I think you should do in this situation. When people ask me like, oh, what's the best blank, or what should I do now? I'm like, why don't you try and answer it? And like, let's talk about it, or like go, because everyone has such a different story, such a different way of thinking. But the one thing I always can say with confidence is like, the main purpose I think anybody should ever have with anything is just trying to better themselves in some way as often as they can, right? If you just went a year, like let's say that the person listening went the past year watching TV every day and not doing anything for themselves, and that's kind of their life, like, let that be your story, to where now you can say you had a really shitty year and you weren't productive and you got back on and crushed it, right? And really focused on yourself. I think it's always, like, my point is, we always have a story, right? Whether we do awesome stuff or we don't do so awesome stuff, or we try really hard or we don't try at all, like, it's still the story, and it's never too late to make that the good part of the story, right? Like, I sometimes get motivated by that. And you mentioned that a little bit ago, where you said, or your friend said, like, how will you remember the last year? Will you remember it as a year where you were on the couch doing nothing, or doing something better? So I think, like, with fitness, with rehab from injuries, with certain goals, I mean, this applies to all of it. Like, how do you want that chapter or combination of chapters to feel, to look, to sound, you know? And that's really what we do. Like, sometimes I won't find a purpose. Like right now, I'm doing the squat every day challenge because I wanted a clearer purpose. You know, I wanted an actual specific tangible thing. Like if I don't know what to do today, I have to warm up and I have to push some heavy weight. That's my structure. But the reason I pick that, the reason like anybody picks really anything is because I know that would make me have to try and become better every day because it's going to be such a clear indicator, you know? It doesn't really matter if it's squatting every day or a different exercise or doing something in a different way, but I just had to pick something that would get me on that track, like to feel like I'm doing something better every day. And now I know even if I don't do it amazingly well, if I don't get really, really strong from it, whatever happens in 3 months, let's say I do it that long, I'll be able to say, I attempted something hard every single day and I'm proud of that. And that's it. You know, whether my body changes a ton or not at all, like I don't really care because I attempted that thing. So kind of going all over, but it's like, I feel like I think that should be the main goal that every other specific thing stems from. It's like, are you trying to improve all the time or not? You know?
That's as far, I think I think you hit it right on the head, especially, repeating something is that progress isn't linear ever, is never linear. And you're going to take steps back. You're going to go back from behind. And like you said about your story, it kind of gave me some Joe Rogan vibes there with his whole, you need to be the superhero and you need to live your life like you're the superhero in your movie. And it's the beginning and you're the nobody who's all down, and you're going to pick yourself up and do something amazing. And as long as I think, there's I don't, I'm glad you mentioned, you brought that up because, in retrospect, I don't want anything that I've said to come off like I'm looking down on or judging anybody for, taking the last year, to heal, to be healthy, whether they needed it, they needed to just lay low because that's how they coped. There's no judgment there, but
Yeah.
it's what do you, like you said, it's what do you do next? And as long, whatever it is, it has to be for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to pull out one of my favorite Marcus Aurelius quotes,
Super
that he said
stoic.
that it never ceases to amaze me that we all love ourselves more than other people, but we care more about other people's opinions than our own. And I think there's something like inherently relatable to that in our current life, and in the way our culture is, and something that that I find grounds me whenever whenever aren't sure why I'm doing something. It gives you sort of a reference point to take a step back and go, okay, this is for me. This isn't for because I think because I think it'll make me look good, or I think this is because someone else wants me to. It is that you're doing it for yourself, and there's nothing more rewarding that you can do, no matter what it is. Health, whether it's health, whether it's physical health, and whether we're exercising, whether it's mental health, and it's seeking out someone to talk to. Anything that you can do for yourself is the best thing that you can do, because we're a species that relies on each other, and we're very much a communal species. But in order to have really good, strong relationships, you need to have a strong relationship with yourself. You need to be your own whole person to even begin to try to take on some of the problems of other people. You only have so much bandwidth, so to speak. So
Yeah.
you need to be able to support your own. If you can't support the bandwidth of your own of yourself, how can you really expect someone else to be able to rely on you if you can't rely on yourself to be there for you when you need it?
100%, man. That was a clean quotation of stoicism. That was pretty. It's like you memorized that or something.
There's a good amount of them up here.
Oh yeah, and I
Shout out
agree
to
with what
the
you said.
Daily
Is
Stoic app.
Oh yeah. I agree with what you said of the stoicism. I mean, teach their own. Like if you want to make your life a full on stoic, go for it. But I probably not going to be the most, like, that's a pretty tough life. Like you said, it's, if you really go everything stoicism, it's pretty solo and kind of, solo. But there's definitely lessons you can take with that for a lot of parts of our lives. Um, yeah, man, like it's, you got to do it for yourself. And I think it's always, I don't think anything's ever like, I'm not a big believer of balance in anything, right? I think we always talk about like, and I don't know if that's controversial or if that's a pretty normal thing. I don't even know what a lot of people think
Hot
about that.
takes.
Hot takes, but like,
Hot takes.
yeah, but like we talk about work-life balance, we talk about balance with our health, balance with all these things, but I don't think we should always search for balance. I think you should just search for really putting an effort into where you want to put an effort, right? Like what I mean is like if someone, like sometimes people will say, I'm trying not to confuse myself here, but like your note of taking care of yourself, right? Like if you want to have bandwidth for other people, for other things, you have to take care of yourself. And sometimes I'll hear people say like, oh, but I need to have balance. Like I have to, yes, I want to take care of myself, but I need to focus on these things and these things and these things. And there's so many things that like the balance needs to be even, right? And what I'm trying to say is sometimes people I think will mistakenly think of themselves as like just another piece, right? Equally as important as all other things. So it's like, all right, I have kids, I have spouses or significant others, I have work, I have fill in the blank. So I'm just one kind of equal piece to all that. So right now I'll focus on the rest. But it's like we need to, I think, vastly prioritize ourselves over all of that stuff. Not to say that we shouldn't care about kids, spouses, work, other stuff. That stuff should be a big focus, but you can't really give that stuff justice if you're not like deeply prioritizing yourself. And it might sound bad, it might sound super selfish, and it is. I mean, it's selfish, but that's I think it's a good kind of selfish, right? Like I think, I mean, I maybe I'll be able to speak for you as well, just because you're talking about stoicism, all this stuff. But tell me what you think. Like the people that I respect the most in the world, that I think are not just doing awesome stuff, but they're incredible people that are really impacting like their lives or the world or their own world around them, are the people that are so deeply committed to their own habits, right? And still manage to do other shit. Like people that seem to have awesome families. And I know it's never perfect, right? But they have awesome families. They are putting out things into the world. They're changing things. They have movements, but they still get up. They go work out. They take care of themselves. They're like very selfish with their own block of time for themselves, no matter what else happens. And I think the people who seem to struggle a lot, which I get, but struggle a lot, are the ones who, as soon as other commitments come up, they'll the first thing they get rid of is their own time. They're like, I can't work out today. I can't do this because this is more important. But that starts to have a domino effect, and it gets really ugly when we just look at our life and we're like, okay, I'm taking care of my family, my work's good, all this is good, but when do I actually do anything for myself? Like, when do I train my body? When do I move my body? When do I read? When do I study? When do I do anything that makes me excited? I think that's a dark place to go, And I think it's pretty badass to have a life, even if you're not shooting for all these crazy goals, or you don't necessarily need all these metrics in your mind, right? It's just like, am I someone who daily does things for myself and holds that super tight, no matter what else happens? Like that was, I know I went all over, but
I love the hot take. The hot take about balance.
it's me excited, man.
And I do think it's sort of it's in the same. It's the same vein as you mentioned before, as the cliche of talking about the journey, which is just life. Yes. My question is, what is that? What is balance? I guess I should say quotation mark fingers balance. You know, is what is exactly being balanced? Kind of the example you gave. Are we trying to balance? Is it a balance of what's being balanced? Is it the balance of our time between ourselves and other people? Is it, I think it's another one of these cliches that we hear about and we talk about, and it sounds really great, but it sounds like everything is as it should be. But sometimes, sometimes is balance, is that complacency? Is it, things being easy? What, I guess I would question anybody who really stresses the idea of balance of what balance of what,
Yeah.
if we're going to, I think there's there's balance, but then there's also, um, we'll say, making concessions and making
Yeah.
there are things that you don't want to compromise on.
And
I
priorities
think,
move. Yeah.
right. I just finished this book called "Don't Split the Difference" by, I don't know if you ever. I'm trying to remember
I know the
the.
name. You'll say it, but I know the title definitely.
Yeah, it is by. I'll double check his name, but
While you're searching it, I'll just say like I'm.
his
Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah his it's by Chris Voss, who's this former CIA negotiator.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of, the idea of don't split the difference is that sometimes we compromise just because it's easy, and we compromise because it saves us the trouble of having to either of having to push back on somebody else or something else. When there are all sorts of these situations where splitting the difference and meeting in the middle, you both lose. The example he gives is him and his wife. They're going out and he wants to wear a pair of black shoes and his wife wants him to wear a pair of brown shoes. So they split the difference and he wears one of each. you know, Nobody wins. So, in that, it's obviously a bit of a ridiculous example, but I do think there's something important where, we're not, you want to be amenable and you want to, obviously, you have other people in your life and you want, you need to, everyone has different schedules and different lives. And so there's never going to be no, you can never speak for somebody else, but it's an important question to ask whether or not, are we, when we compromise, when we look for balance, is it because we're compromising in the way that makes things the easiest, but in the process of doing so, are we maybe are we maybe sacrificing something that where we should really just, there are places where you just need to maybe draw the line. You just need, and, whether it's, I need X amount of time for myself in a day, or, I need to do this. I want to speak very vaguely because it's a, it's a concept, you don't want to tell people never to, telling people not to compromise with each other is
Mm-hmm.
A little bit extreme, but, there are cases where you just have to, sometimes you just have to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah, man. I think it's a good, I mean, I think I have another like 10 to 15 if you want to keep going, but I think this is a good, like, general idea to really hammer in. And that's what I want this podcast to be about. And like any conversations we ever have is I'd rather pick kind of a really important theme and just go super deep on it and drill it home, because again, I'm just only speaking from what I know. And that's like the way that I've learned in the past. And I think we both share this pretty equally, is like, we seem to be people who really like to try and learn new information, learn new perspectives, right? Study different, like you said, philosophy and stoicism and negotiation books and all that, just as a real way of like trying to find what will work for us or what we can implement. Because I mean, I think we both have probably studied hundreds, if not thousands, of different ideas, people over however many years, right? And there's so much info, but the stuff that's actually for real changed me, not just like here and there, are the really simple points that just have been made abundantly clear, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it could work for so many different, but sometimes I'll say stuff that to me I forget it's just so simple. And sometimes I feel kind of dumb, I'm like, oh, I'm telling this person to do this super simple thing. Do I sound like, is this kind of like jerky advice, because I'm telling them something that sounds so obvious. But then I remember back like, oh, somebody once told me something that I thought was profound and amazing. But to them, they were like, this is just really simple stuff. You just have to commit or just focus on it, right? So my point is, what you're saying is like, the idea of focusing on ourselves in a lot of ways sounds so obvious, sounds so simple, sounds easier said than done, right? Like, yeah, but what about when someone needs me? What about when this commitment comes in? Especially then is when you need to stick to it. It's like, I also, as you said, I think you have to find where you draw lines on different things. There isn't just an like equal balance in our whole life. It's like there are certain things in my life, and I'm sure in yours, where we are extra lenient with, where we might put ourselves a little bit further back on, because that's an area where I can't think of an exact example, right? But that's an area where we might be more flexible with, where we'll say, okay, I'll give more time or energy to these people, to this, because of that activity or that thing. And there's other areas where I'll do my best to have a very stern line of like, it takes a really, really big emergency or type of person in my life to keep me from doing this, because it's so foundational to how I actually live my life, right? Like exercise. And I'm definitely not perfect with this. I have a lot of bouts where I'll skip stuff and I fall off track and then I have to get back on. But when I'm doing well with training, I like, unless it's like an emergency with my family or my girlfriend or something, like I won't let anything get in the way of a certain time block or a daily thing I'm trying to do. Not because I'm some like obsessed workout person that has to always be working on myself. It's not that. It's if I can't commit to one thing for myself, like who am I, right? Like I think about that a lot. It's like, okay, if I have one thing or three things in my life that I've deemed important enough to attempt, and then I let that completely just vanish because someone said you have to have this meeting or you need to focus on these priorities, I'm like, I feel so bad about myself, right? If I can't stick to something as basic as that. So sometimes I'll simply keep a habit going, even if I don't have a clear direction, just because I committed to it for myself. I'm like, I don't really care what's going on. I don't care if my workout sucks today. I don't care if like anything is off. I said I was going to take this time to do something for myself. I'm going to do it, and then go focus on the other people or the other commitment, you know? So I feel like it's sometimes just like you have to, like certain things you have to be very like selfish with, and some other things very selfless with, but it's not always going to be an all around balance.
Sure. And well, you said habits are habits, especially, to just touch on that briefly, and, we can, I think we're coming to a good wrapping up point, but yeah, habits are just tremendously important for building momentum in anything, whether it's work, life, anything. You need to be able to establish a pattern of consistency in something, whether it's getting up and eating breakfast in the morning. It's getting up at the same time every day, or taking 30 minutes to read a book every day. But establishing habits like that is as important to any is important to every aspect of your life, because you are not the things you do don't make you who you are, but they do reinforce them, where it's not that this is my sense of self, and so I need to go do this great thing to prove it. It's not about that, but it reinforces to yourself that you can be the person that you want to be, and doing that through habits is incredibly important. And and as a final mention of stoicism, because I
love it.
I've come to appreciate a lot of the lessons this year, especially in a world where things are sort of out of control. And when you need to I think the most value that it can bring people is sort of centering themselves, is helping them center themselves and, get back control of their brain and their thought processes if the things have gone a little bit astray. Is one of the things that's very stressed in the philosophy, is the idea of journaling. And I think I'm someone that I've started, and I really recommend to everybody, is keeping some sort of journal, taking it in part as a habit, as again, establishing a habit, but just, whether it's 5 minutes every night, or whether when you wake up in the morning and you write about something, you're dreaming, to just get in the habit of doing something like that for yourself, where you're taking the moment with your own thoughts and you're going, all right, these are, either, you could, it doesn't matter what you journal about. It could be some funny thing that you thought of. It's about the habit of it. It's about taking the time to sort of take a baseline of where your thoughts are, where your brain's at, and to just get some stuff out, our brains are amazing things, and we can keep all sorts of information, like really cool stoicism quotes and all sorts of cool, good stuff. But sometimes it just helps to get it on paper and to just organize like that. So
Yeah, man.
yeah, habit is everything.
I'm happy you went into that extra detail, by the way, because maybe this is just my own issues, but I'm someone when I say what I think is maybe could be used as advice for somebody, or if someone else I'm talking to, like what you just said is really good advice for a person's life, when they're like maybe buzzwords or common words that are in that advice that I think a lot of people hear really often, I like to kind of stick on that point, like I said, because even though what you're saying is so important, like journaling is very useful, I think that's one example of a thing a lot of people are talking about now. They're saying like, oh, you should journal, you should have this habit, this habit, this habit. And sometimes it's such a repeated piece of info that it might get drowned out by like, okay, I know, but I'm busy, or I know, but I don't have time, or I know, but whatever. So I like that you just went into that extra kind of why it's important, because I think that might have been something that makes it stick for whoever's listening. And I think that's important to always do. It's the same thing with fitness. It's like, yeah, be consistent. That's just such a use thing. But you went into really good detail of like why that actual habit of consistency will matter long term, while it will matter with all these other variables.
Comes
So
back
that was
to purpose. Comes back to purpose.
comes back
It comes
to
back
purpose.
to purpose. It comes back to being you want to be purposeful. If that's it's you gotta know why. You gotta do things that bring meaning, and you want to know why you're doing something is the biggest freedom you can have, because you can do it. You can give it your 100% because there's no second guessing it, because you know.
Mm-hmm. 100, dude. Though that was a good way to phrase it. Like the freedom aspect, it's like sometimes I'll do things like I think I used to when I was younger with fitness or with something else, I would get maybe a little too caught up, even though again, as we established, goal setting is super important and having steps is important and all these things. Like sometimes I think because for a long time, I've gotten too caught up in the idea of, again, what are the outcomes, what are the goals, what's the plan, what's the whatever. Now, sometimes I'll simply set out to do something in a day just so I can say I set out to do it and then accomplish it. Right. So I can prove to myself, like, I can commit to something and then get it done. Like that's like a little energy booster, It's like, okay, how can I make my day better? I could randomly go about it and maybe have a good day, or I could just say I'm going to do these 3 kind of challenging things, do them, and then go to sleep knowing I committed to 3 hard things and I did them, right? And that makes my day better. So it's like you just said, it's like the purpose is really important. Journaling's a great tool, but it can be even more valuable when we understand why it's important, right? Setting out to say I'm going to track my day every single night for 5 minutes or 2 minutes and journal, and then committing to that is like, that's pretty rewarding, and you'll probably, a lot of good other things will come from it.
I like,
yeah, man.
I like that. It's almost the why is more important than the what.
Yeah.
Because the why makes the what, if that makes, whatever you're doing, whatever your goal is, if you have a purpose behind it, that makes it gives it the weight to be worth doing. Because if you don't have, without that why, the what maybe doesn't matter. Maybe should be something else.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I like, I guess if I could have anything like a final, a big idea to drive home for people listening, is just to do things with a purpose. And only you get to assess, and only you get to judge what has purpose, what has purpose and what has meaning to you. You can't let nobody else gets to define that for you. But whatever you do, make sure you can bring it back somewhere inside of you that justifies why you're doing it, no matter what it is.
Yeah. Let's wrap it up there, man. I could keep going for a while. I feel like we're just kind of rolling now. This is.
I think we got into a groove towards the back half of it. So
we can keep it there. But I'll say, and I mean, honestly, if you want to ever do this again, or many times, I would love to have you come do this again, because this is fun. And I think
be happy to.
Yeah, man. And I think it would be good too, because then the next time we could like kind of restart where we left off now and kind of summarize, like just really in the first few minutes of that one, get into what we talked about today, kind of the importance, and then just keep going with it, because I think we'll probably naturally just circle back to like some of the stuff you emailed me again, some of your history with certain things, maybe go more into like the mental health aspect a little bit more and talk about motivation, etc. But I think like instead of
trying to cover a lot of different bases here.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why I want to keep it a little more simple to take from for today. But I think like instead of just going to a million different topics, just really keep getting deeper and deeper on this idea of purpose and habit, because that could itself be like life changing for somebody, even if it's super simple, And I think you mostly like did a really good job today of kind of placing the importance on that, and not just the importance, but how to actually think different and to make it happen. Like I want people to take really clear steps right away. Like today, turn this off and go do something more purposeful. So thank you for that, bro.
Of course, man. I appreciate thanks for having me on, dude. This was fun. Definitely, it's a new medium for me. So, getting used to I think it'll be good to hear for my benefit, to kind of understand how the thing, because I do think there's a little bit, while a podcast is a conversation, I do think there's a way to make it to be more cognizant about an audience while you're speaking, whether it's speaking slower or more deliberately, or taking time to, maybe not stream of conscious out into the ether. But no, dude, I honestly, I really appreciate you having me on. I'm happy to, it was fun talking through some of this stuff. Great, happy to come back on and talk through anything else in detail, or, updates or whatever.
Yeah, bro.
What have you. So
absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I think we should both study it up. And like you said, make it the same kind of free speech, kind of moving around wherever we want to, but maybe have a little more of a goal of like what we'll get out of it for people. Cause that's the whole idea. So, oh yeah, we can do it. I mean, maybe this month we'll do another. All right. Plug time. Is there any cool stuff you're working on, or any ideas you want people to leave with, or to find you at, or anything?
Plug time. I don't have a great plug. I'm a bit of a social media hermit. I think if my last Instagram post might be over a year old at this point. So I'm not here for the self promotion, but I definitely recommend for the if what I'd say, I definitely let to summarize. I guess if I had to leave people with a big thing, it's just take the time. Things are crazy enough right now that you take the time to understand why you're doing the things you do them, why the thing, and just really take that opportunity to self-optimize in that way. I think there's a lot of time, and I guess when I say do, but I also mean think, because I do think there's a lot of people dedicate a lot of energy and a lot of time thinking about things that they don't have any control over, and they let them bog them down, whether it's stress, with stress or anxiety. And it's easier said than done, and it's better done in practice, which is why I love journaling, because it's part of the things that help. But just try to just really, to just focus on the things that you can control, because that's the stuff that's going to really meaningfully benefit you in the long run. And let the other stuff be. I'm not telling people not to pay attention to the rest of the world and to isolate themselves in a little box, but you can't control other people's opinions. You can't control anyone else's actions, but you can control how you let those actions and those opinions affect you. And you can choose to not let them affect you. You can choose, if it's good advice, you can choose to take it. Just center yourself, because the world's crazy, and the world it is so easy to lose track and to lose yourself and your time to everyone else and everything else. And just make sure to bring it back home. Make sure you know why you're doing what you do.
Couldn't agree more, man. Dude, that opens so many more rabbit holes I would just keep going with. So let's keep it there. That was a great take home. Thank you for that, man. I'm gonna keep you on if you want. Once I hit stop recording, we can just kind of wrap up a little more. But
Sweet.
That's all I got. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for coming on, bro.
Thank you for having me. So long, everybody.
See you, Matt. Hello again, Harris here. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the entire interview with Matt. I really appreciate it, and I know he does as well. It was a great chat. think we got through some really good stuff, and I hope you agree and can take away some really actionable lessons for your own life and fitness. Final reminder, if you are not currently on the email list that I provide and you would like to be, all the information you need to know is below. You can jump on there. As soon as you get in, please feel free to send me an email, ask me your questions, tell me your challenges, or just say hi. I would love to get to know you better, to chat through some things, and potentially answer your questions on a podcast right here. Thank you so much. Have an amazing day, and I will see you, or talk to you rather, in the next episode.